We'll be speaking to Andrew Peaple, who's a journalist. It is the Right Honourable Peter Estlin, who is, as I said, the 691st Lord Mayor of the City of London. Can you come up to the stage, please? And a round of applause. Thank you.
For inviting me to Unbound. It really is a pleasure to be here. I've got 2 points I'd like to make and then one ask. As Lord Mayor for the year, I'm promoting the agenda Shaping Tomorrow's City Today. And the first part of that agenda is really to promote the innovation and technology that is driving our economy, the scale of innovation across the UK, whether it is fintech here, particularly in London, where we're regarded as the global leaders. We've got about 76,000 fintech people, individuals in 1,600 startups. And it's a tremendous growth industry. But it is not just fintech that is driving our economy. We've got the scale of innovation, whether it's in Cambridge with life sciences, the creative and media industries in Bristol, cyber in Belfast. Indeed, we've got about 800 cyber startups. And so the first element of my agenda is really whether across the UK or internationally taking delegations really to promote the sheer scale of innovation that is taking place in this country. Now, of course, there's that little B word, Brexit, which tends to take the headlines. And I think it's really creativity that is out there that we see across Unbound and actually gives some voice to the scale of this innovation that is not only driving our economy, but also helping us to address some of our social issues. And that really leads me to the second part of my agenda around shaping tomorrow's city today. Because we all know that that pace of change is, whilst exciting and creating that economic growth, it also creates challenges in terms of taking people with us. And I'd like to reflect on the fact that within the UK today, largely, we have a very diverse population, which is brilliant. But within that population, we have some 17 million people who, in reality, their jobs over the course of the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, will fundamentally change. And therefore, my call and the call of many is how do we use technology not only to create that economic growth, but use technology to help reshape us. Gone are the days when we had an education for life. We now need a skills agenda that deals with sort of like a skills MOT. Now, that language is not a language that fundamentally motivates people. And therefore, one of the challenges is how do we connect? How do we use technology to connect with such a diverse workforce? But there is a second group of people who we need to reflect upon. Because whilst digitization of our industries is driving that economic growth, there is also a risk that it is becoming not divisive, but it is creating a separation in our population. And as of today, we have 11.9 million people in this country who do not have the essential digital skills. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean by the ability to go online, the ability to use your mobile phone to do a transaction, to do a communication. Skills that probably all of us here take for granted. But there are 11.9 million people in this country, up from 11.3 million people last year, who do not have those skills. And therefore, as a society, how do we use technology to engage with those individuals? Now, you may immediately think, well, they're all people over 65. I'm not one of them yet, but I will be soon. Yes, there are quite a large number of our older members of the population. But the analysis shows that of those 11.9, 15% are under the age of 20, mainly from more deprived areas. There's also a huge cohort of those who are more disadvantaged, physically impaired in some ways. So how do we embrace technology so that it is more inclusive? And that really leads me to my ask, which is there is some fantastic absolutely fantastic entrepreneurism out here. There's some fantastic technologies that we are leveraging. And I'm seeing many of those as I travel around the country. I'm going to be in Leeds, Sheffield, and Manchester next week, Edinburgh the week after, and then off to Australia and India with many startups. But how do we engage the entrepreneurial population, the startups, as well as our large companies to take on that digital skills agenda? So that not only can we create the economic growth that is powering the UK economy, but also ensure that we take everyone with us. So I'll leave you with that thought, and Andrew, hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Peter. Absolutely wonderful that you're making this a core part of your year as Lord Mayor. I wanted to invite to the stage now as well someone else who is very involved in this area, Gori Yahaya. Gori is the founder and CEO of UpSkill Digital, very active in this area. And Gori, can I ask you, just as you come to the stage, do you see that same problem? What are the sort of digital skills that people are lacking? What do you see as the core issues here?
It's a big question. As the Lord Mayor mentioned, defining digital skills actually is one of the biggest problems that we have. Digital skills can mean a broad range of things. It's all about the context. Of course, from a role perspective, digital skills to an office manager, different digital skills for a data scientist, for example. But it broadly means the skills somebody needs to be able to use or engage with technology to perform a task or solve a problem. And the Lord Mayor kind of highlighted two different areas of issues we have, which is the inclusion part, where a lot of people don't have access to either good broadband or ability to really learn how to transact online, be safer online. Then the other side is there's a changing world of work where individuals now need better skills or different skills to be able to engage in new jobs that have been created. So the problem is broad. It's quite wide, but I think what we're trying to do today is talk about how we can solve that in the different areas in different ways and look at the organization that can help us do that.
You've both identified motivation here as a core issue. What is stopping people getting motivated to get skilled up digitally? And what are the barriers that are still existing that are just stopping people from doing what they need to do in this area? Maybe Peter first.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the barriers, if you like, reflect the different populations. So if you take the inclusion agenda that Gori, and we've mentioned, the motivation there is in some cases ignorance. All right, they don't know how, and we take it for granted that people are being encouraged to do it. I mean, when my kids sort of show me some of the things I don't know how to do, so there's that ignorance and that fear of asking the question. There is also an element where we have, across the country, we have got people who haven't got physical access. They can't afford the data. Again, we take that for granted. So to what extent do we create ubiquity in access to the internet? But then there's sheer motivation, because we hear, particularly in the media, a lot of negative stories about fraud and about corruption. And that's not good. And it leads to a society that says, well, actually, I don't want to engage in this. Yeah. And therefore, the language we use, and I'm not necessarily the best person to articulate that, but the language we use in engaging people, in articulating the benefits of digitization, both from a health perspective, from education, engaging in finance, but your passions, alongside some of the risks that exist, because we shouldn't shy away from the risks. And I've seen some great technology out there, around the display.
Get people more motivated?
I mean, the Lord Mayor mentioned it. It's not knowing what you need to know, right? Not knowing what you need to learn, or also not understanding how best to implement training within your company. There are, I think, something around over half of the UK workforce doesn't have the skills, the digital skills they need to operate, more productively, more efficiently, and we have a huge productivity gap in the UK. It costs us something around £65 billion, and many either small companies or large-scale sort of corporates struggle to find a way to identify what people need, what the gap is, which hence they don't have the motivation to implement something, which is an issue there. But on the other side, individuals are thinking, what skills do I need for the future, right? And how do I find them out? Because new jobs are going to be created. Some people need to reinvent themselves for a particular role. So, motivation is, how we solve that is by, getting the terminology right, making sure people are aware of the importance of continuously learn, and how you can get access to that, not just through online learning, but through face-to-face engagement with colleagues, friends that can tell you about what they've learned and how they can help themselves help you grow.
Now, Lord Mayor, as we said, you've got a year in office. You've talked about creating a coalition for digital intelligence. What do you mean by that? What's going to be the aim of that? Is this about getting companies to share knowledge, that kind of thing? Can you talk a little bit to that?
So, I think we've largely been recognizing this challenge of the digital skills gap. And so, actually, if you look and do some analysis across the UK today, there are some fantastic initiatives out there, whether it's Google Garage, Barclays Life Skills, individual charity organizations, the Good Things Foundation. So there's some fantastic initiatives. And government is also seeking to try and lay some foundations with the essential digital skills sort of definitions, again, starting to get into the vernacular, the things that we need to feel comfortable with. But it's fragmented.
Right.
It's like a jigsaw without the picture.
Yeah.
You've got all these pieces all over the place. And so the reality is and again, it's the language. How do you communicate what it is that we need to undertake? I'll call it the map, all right? But then how do we, having created that map of where the needs are and the different groups of the population, how do you then motivate them? So we're working with the creative and media industries. We've got a meeting with them on the 1st of August, where DCMS, Department of Digital Culture and Media and Sports, together with the 30-odd companies, we're looking at how do we engage? How do we engage? What are the programs? How do we get across to the population? But how do we then map them and point them to these initiatives that are out there? Many of them are free. Most of them are free. Whether you're repurposing libraries or accessing business facilities and getting people on board. So it's very much a coalition that is recognizing that this is a universal challenge. This is not going to get solved by individual initiatives. Yes, in the delivery, but there needs to be more cohesion around that. And so it's great. We've got now 30 or 40 companies. We're growing, and the aim is to do that across the country, so that this is not just a London-based issue. It actually is a national issue.
And I guess the sort of people we've got in the audience today could get on board and help with that. How much responsibility should there be on tech companies to do some of this education and upskilling that's needed? Maybe a question for both of you there.
Well, if I may start by saying, look, let's start by saying it is a responsibility of all business, all right, in the first instance, and two categories. Their own employees, so as Gori was saying, how are you creating a culture within your workplace as part of an ongoing culture of sort of education? And I don't mean it in an education sense, but as a way of learning about where the business is going, the skills you need, and not being fearful of it. I don't know what the skills will be that we need in 10 years' time.
Right.
So that ambiguity, that lack of unknown shouldn't faze us. But the second is, for businesses, how are you engaging with your customers? There's some great product out there, really, really great product, but how are you working with your customers so that they can engage in it both for the benefit and the risk?
Yeah.
So that's the first part. Technology can really play a part in it. Whereas the next unicorns could well come from this space. If we can create the tools that people can champion, that would be great.
Yeah. Gori, perspective on this?
I'll second that. I think, we have a room full of amazing tech entrepreneurs in here, people working on some phenomenal products. And, they're engaging their customers to help them, live better digital lives, technically, right? So what they can do is, as Lord Mayor had mentioned, is how do you help them truly get hands-on with it, but also be vigilant of how they share their data, how they can feel more in control of things like that, because that is one of the issues that we have where people sort of feel fearful towards what might go wrong when they use certain products. And I feel, a lot of tech companies sort of think we have to be able to just sell the product, make sure they're using it, and we're winning there. But there's sort of an extra layer that they need to consider, which is how do we help them really get value out of this product to improve their lives, right? So there are companies like, Instagram rolled out their anti-bullying feature, for example. So they're thinking a little bit along the lines of how can we, from a social impact perspective, really support some of the issues that build. And also companies like Google, as Lil May mentioned, have a digital garage program that provides free training, across the board. So, tech companies aren't all equipped to be able to give everything out for free, but at the same time, they can be very conscious of how they are educating their customers on their products to hopefully help them live better lives and be more, just basically support them as best as they can.
Cool. Well, let's get a perspective from the audience out there. Does anyone have any questions for our two panelists on this topic? If you could just raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you.
If you can see them.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could just say who you are and where you're from, that'd be great.
Your name is Patrick wants to know about the scale and scope of the work that's being done to improve the digital infrastructure in London and throughout the UK.
So I can talk a little bit about, obviously, the City of London, and particularly, creating access to free Wi-Fi. Obviously, the whole question of moving up to 5G, we're starting to pilot that. That's a different political issue. I'm not going there. But in all seriousness, the importance of actually creating that framework. But it is an issue because there are 16% of that 11.9 million people physically don't have access, and that's largely in the more rural parts. But we also have dead spots across cities. So we are having to work with the telecoms companies really to promote what I would call ubiquity in Wi-Fi, because ultimately, in the same way we treat water as a commodity that we all take for granted we have access to, realistically, in the 21st century, we need to create that. So we have a gap physically, and certainly that is something that the city is obviously seeking to address in the square mile, but that's just a small part. But we're working with government to sort of push that agenda, particularly in the more rural areas.
It's a great question. Any other questions from the audience that Mark can help with? This lady on the front row here.
Hi, thank you so much to the panel. My name's Amy and I'm from WPP. It's very interesting that you described kind of digital access kind of like a commodity like water. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you feel like in the future digital access will almost be like a fundamental human right, perhaps in the UK at least?
Well, I mean, again, I'll go and then Gori can make a comment. Look, the speed of change is one of the challenges that we're facing in the sense that realistically, over 2 or 3 decades, we've seen massive migration towards the digitization of our industries. And the issues of data privacy and data management, these are all issues that are being debated, but I'm not sure there's a clear understanding of where we go. And there are certainly different practices around the world. One of the most interesting was in Estonia a few weeks ago. And of course, their government decided to digitize their economy through digital identity, digital education, digital healthcare, digital finance. And for the first 4 or 5 years, they had a real uphill battle with the population. But once they got over the hurdle of the fact that ultimately you own your own data. So whilst government and public authorities and others will collect it through whether it's cameras on the streets, et cetera, you ultimately own any data that is attached to you and your individual identifier. And as long as we respect that and develop policies to respect that, then that's the way I think we need to go. And that's the role that the UK could play in a 21st century world where actually we do not have standards in this area. So we need to help to forge that not only across the UK, but actually internationally and create a set of standards that are fit for the 21st century.
And I'll jump in on that with regards to the entitlements that we think adults should have in the UK. So the government only rolled out the essential digital skills entitlement. So the same way that any adult should have access to maths and English skills, now in the UK as of next year, you will have the ability to get access to digital skills training, for free. And that's really important. It shows that we're kind of moving in the right direction as a country, as a city of London, but also as a country to help ensure that everybody gets to the mark that we need to progress moving forward. Productivity will benefit off the back of it. You know, our digital consumption will benefit, the economy will benefit as well. So there are steps being taken to ensure everybody has the level that we need, but at the same time, it also takes a lot of the businesses in this room, larger corporates, to invest in ensuring that we move the dial of digital skills in the UK so that we can become, you know, look at this as more of an opportunity. You know, for us as the digital age comes along, adults can create some really interesting products, but also, you know, communicate better, live better lives, and yeah, hopefully we'll improve off the back of that.
Peter, you cited Estonia there. Are there any other, and you travel a lot, are there any other countries or cities that are really getting this that we can learn from here in the UK?
Well, there are learnings all over the world. And I mean, I've just got back from China. And, you know, I don't fully understand all of their practices, but they do use a lot of their biometric data that they're gathering, all right, for beneficial purposes. There are also privacy issues. So, but it's not for us to dictate on other countries. But there are some great examples. I mean, Ping An, which is one of the big Chinese insurers, I mean, it's fantastic what they're doing with that data to help individuals from a healthcare insurance perspective. I mean, it really is quite revolutionary.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
So there are some great examples, and part of it is sharing the best examples, but also working across cultures, across countries, to also, as I said, deal with some of the privacy issues and some of the challenges. So that's one that I was really taken by. Estonia, as I said, stands out as probably one of them. Singapore, again, they've created a very structured, skills-based workforce, and again, we can learn from that. So it is a question of learning, but encouraging some of our startups and particularly edtech businesses here, happy to take you on some of the international visits, particularly if you've got product that we could help you promote internationally.
Great. Well, there's an invitation. Get a free trip with the Lord Mayor out to all around the world.
I didn't say it was free.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. It's a fascinating topic. Thank you so much for fitting us into your busy schedule, both of you. And please give us, the two of them, a big round of applause.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Really good. Very good. Very good. Nice one.
Thank you.
Thank you.